This video is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends, available on iOS and Android.
And we are back for the Season 8, Episode 5 Series Q&A. Why are stones so vulnerable to dragonfire? Those buildings and even the Red Keep just blew up. Are the bricks made partially with dynamite? Well, as it turns out, some rocks do explode when heated. From my younger days at camp, I certainly remember exploding rocks in the fire pits. Apparently this is due to trapped water and air in the rock heating up and expanding, though the rocks should explode in every direction, not just towards, say, the Golden Company. The explosions that we see do seem a bit off in that 1, the stone itself seems to be an accelerant to the fire, not possible, and 2, again, the direction of the stone's movement, outward away from the dragon. I have to say, there's absolutely no way that the wind of dragon breath could propel something as large as the city walls forward. This would inversely push the dragon back, like launching a rocket into the air, and the resulting air friction would rip Dany and Drogon apart. Perhaps the Lannisters were foolish enough to store massive amounts of boiling oil on one side of the wall and the thing exploded? Who knows? And speaking of dragons and explosions, I have to take time out for my sponsor. I have an amazing announcement about the mobile game I recommended to you last time, Raid Shadow Legends. And their special tournament is happening globally right now. You can compete with me, yes I play, it's an addictive game, and millions of other players in a massive arena tournament for crazy in-game prizes and even physical prizes that winners will get delivered straight to their house. Just a reminder for those who somehow missed it, Raid is the brand new free-to-play mobile RPG with the most amazing storyline, awesome 3D graphics, giant boss fights, PvP battles, and hundreds of champions to collect and customize. This is absolutely the best time to join the action. Go to the description of the video, download Raid only through my link to get 50,000 silver immediately as a new player, and you'll also automatically enter the special launch tournament right away. And now back to the Q&A. Do you think the Daenerys going crazy plotline will be mirrored in the books? If so, is this just a case of terrible execution by the showrunners to display her descending into lunacy over the last 2 to 3 seasons? And George will be a little more on the nose with her losing it? She's been doing terrible stuff for 8 seasons. Why has no one mentioned her going over the top prior to Varys if the end goal has always been a mental snap? So whether Dany will go crazy in the books is a big question, and the answer is, I'm not sure. And I don't even know if George R.R. Martin knows. George R.R. Martin writes with a technique he calls gardening. He throws down a bunch of seeds for plots and then decides later which ones sprout and develop, and in retrospect people call the sprouting seeds foreshadowing, while the unsprouted seeds are dismissed as texture or world building. Yes, Book Dany has definitely done some crazy things. Seeds are there, but we don't know if they will develop. Dany burned Mirri Maz Duur alive. She showed no sorrow after the death of Viserys or Rhaego. She blanketly executed people as young as 12 in Astapor. She crucified the great masters of Meereen. She castrated hundreds when she took the city. She allowed Skahaz to torture prisoners who were most likely innocent. At the same time, Dany shows quite a bit of sympathy for people, the exact opposite of what it means to be psychotic. She wants to help the Lázarine harmed by the Dothraki. She wants to free the Unsullied. The death of a girl who she believes Drogon killed haunts her. She wanted to help the refugees of Astapor. She cares for all of the child hostages that she had taken from the elite families of Meereen. She stays in Meereen and marries Hizdahr for the sake of the Meereenese people. In many ways, Dany's character is a contradiction, showing both the ability to selflessly care for others and downright callousness. So what should we make of all of this? Well, some people think the dual nature of Dany is largely due to some messy writing on George's part. Most of the evidence of Dany being caring actually comes from the most recent book, A Dance with Dragons. And this is a plotline that George hadn't originally planned on writing. George originally wanted to jump the story 5 years after A Storm of Swords and pick up with Dany having been queen for 5 years and her leaving on Drogon early in the 4th book. Without the Meereenese plotline, some people believe we would see a clearer, more consistent descent into madness for Dany without the interruption of A Dance with Dragons. And generally, we do know that George plans on having a second Dance of the Dragons, and if the parallel holds, Dany would take on the role of Rhaenyra, a somewhat unstable character from what the Maesters write. That said, George did write A Dance with Dragons. The ink is dry, and Dany has been established as a caring character. So for the past 15-odd years, that Dany has been in George's head. And as for her moments of past cruelty, we also have to remember that in the book, someone is definitely messing with her head, sending her dreams and influencing her decisions. So it's possible that these past cruel actions could be written off as not actually hers, but of some puppet master like Quaithe. Not to mention, if we are talking about the Dance of the Dragons, we need to remember that George purposely wrote the story of Rhaenyra from a biased perspective, that of Maester Gildane. And Gildane takes from sources who are also biased. Rhaenyra may not have been crazy, but instead portrayed poorly by historians. And actually, portraying Daenerys like Rhaenyra, that is ambiguous, seems much more like George R. R. Martin's writing style. Some people in our story will think she's a mad queen, while others will not. Some readers will think she's a mad queen, while others will not. Like many of the other past wars in our story, the truth depends on which side of the conflict you're on. And this complexity is certainly what D&D had trouble conveying. They had her face cartoon villains and put on majestic music when she rode her dragon and made her a hero until suddenly they didn't. In the book, I could actually see Daenerys taking King's Landing and accidentally starting the wildfire stashes. The city burns to the ground, and all of a sudden half the kingdom would think she is a mad queen. But regardless, whether Dany is sane, insane, or ambiguous, George R. R. Martin will have much more time to get to his destination, if he ever makes it. How could Qyburn and Cersei take no actions during the battle? Are we to believe they were so overconfident they had zero strategic moves such as wildfire or additional forces? This especially does not fit Cersei's character, as she has been 3 moves ahead the entire game. Well, I'm not sure Cersei and Qyburn had very many good moves left, and I'm not actually sure Cersei and Qyburn are very good long game players. I would argue that instead they're great improvisers in the short term. Many people point to Cersei's destruction of the Sept as a brilliant long game move that kills all of her enemies, but in truth this wasn't a long play. If we go back to Season 6, yes, Cersei does a lot of staring that makes one think she's planning something big for episodes and episodes, but in truth she wasn't. She couldn't have. Cersei's trial by combat wasn't cancelled until episode 8 of the season, and it's in the same episode that Qyburn reports on the wildfire. Cersei's plan to take out all of her enemies came together at the end of the episode and was executed in the beginning of the next episode that she appears, episode 10. It was improvised. Then in Season 7, Cersei reacts quickly and competently to the Dany threat, but it wasn't really a long-term plan. She consolidated her alliance with the Tarleys, she teamed up with Euron, Qyburn built scorpions, she paid her debt to the Iron Bank and got the Golden Company, and her most diabolical move, claiming her forces would go north but not going, was made up on the fly. Cersei's moves were effective in the short run for maintaining her rule, but Cersei's long game plan was simply not smart. She should have recognized that maintaining the Iron Throne against dragons was impossible. I feel the best move of hers would have been playing for a pardon or becoming Lady of Casterly Rock. Then, perhaps behind the scenes, she could work on poisoning Dany and the dragons, creating division, and forging alliances to retake the throne. But that was Cersei's problem. She wouldn't accept loss and compromise, as she likely thought it would make the deaths of Joffrey, Tywin, Myrcella, and Tommen all be for nothing. And to be fair to Cersei, based on the previous battles, the dragons did seem to be largely neutralized. Bronn nearly killed one, and Euron killed one rather easily. As Cersei had said, had they gotten one good shot off and killed Drogon, it would have made all of the difference. Dany's army would have been demoralized, and the Golden Company probably would have been able to hold them off. After the victory with the vastly superior navy, Cersei could have then wreaked havoc on all of her enemies' cities, with nearly all of Westeros being reachable by sea or river. Based on the information presented, Cersei's plan wasn't bad. How else to deal with dragons than to lure them to an area with scorpions? But it was all short term. The only thing that she could have perhaps done differently was have a better escape plan. Why would Daenerys suddenly snap the moment everyone surrenders to her? This is what she's been working for 8 seasons. Even the Mad King had a reason for wanting to burn the city down. He thought, if I can't have the city, no one can. Daenerys' actions seem inexplicable, and the only attempt at showing her to be the Mad Queen was cobbled together in the previously on segment. Thoughts? I think 1, they were pushing the idea that there was a rage inside Dany after the loss of Jorah, Rhaegal, Missandei, and her relationship with Jon. And that rage couldn't be quenched by a simple surrender. Dany needed to make the world hurt after she had been hurt. After all, it's not just Dany that goes crazy, it's Grey Worm as well. He is taken over by rage and directs it towards the innocent. And to be fair to the showrunners, this is something that people do in real life. People that get bullied try bullying others to manage the pain. People that get hurt in relationships try to hurt others in relationships to manage the pain. Children of abuse often grow up to abuse their children to manage the pain. It isn't effective at all, but people do it anyway. The cycle of human violence perpetuates itself. The second thing I think the writers were going for was political calculus on Dany's part to block Jon's rise. Say Dany accepts the surrender. The new story is Jon and Dany win, and afterwards there's rumbling about Jon's right to the throne and all of that. Divine right and succession stay as the argument, and Dany loses that argument. By completely destroying the city with a shock and awe strategy, the narrative is, holy shit, Dany is not to be messed with, she has a dragon. Who cares about succession and divine right? Power and conquest become the argument, and Dany certainly wins that argument. This kind of gets back to Dany's mentioning of the Machiavellian dilemma. Is it better to be loved or feared? Dany isn't loved, thus she must be feared. How did one-handed Jaime, who by his own admission couldn't have bested a stable boy, beat a battle-hardened psychotic frontline fighting pirate? Well, the simple answer is that he just swam a couple miles to shore and was absolutely exhausted. But I also think we can have fun and cobble together a better argument. So Euron Greyjoy is definitely a character who is not at all interested in his long-term well-being. So what is he interested in? Well, let's go back to Euron's Kingsmoot speech. This is his criticism of Baelon. He was leading us nowhere, and we would still be heading there if it weren't for me. No one loved him, no one wanted to follow him. He led us into 2 wars we couldn't win. I apologize to you for not killing him years ago. So right from the start, Euron tells us exactly what he values. Ambition and being loved. And believe it or not, we can actually see this in his actions. He has the Iron Isles build 1,000 ships, probably crippling the island's economy, but nonetheless leaving open the possibility of a marriage to a queen. And he oddly frames his pursuit as the seduction of a queen. He believes his actions will lead to affection. So he first wants to pair off with Dany, but when that opportunity is taken from him, he goes for Cersei. And what is he strangely concerned with? Being loved by Cersei ahead of his rival Jaime Lannister. He wants love and affection. Just look at how much joy he takes when he parades around Yara. And I will say Euron is insanely successful. He destroys Dany's fleet 3 times, achieves sex with Cersei, he thinks he's going to have a child to take the throne, he kills a dragon. He certainly gets things done, but he doesn't enjoy achievement for its own sake. He thinks achievement leads to being loved. The love of a queen and his followers. Now take Euron on that beach. His fleet is gone. That was his key to achieving affection. He now has no reason for anyone to love him anymore. Except he does. Jaime Lannister, the famed wicked Kingslayer. If Euron could go down in history as the man to kill the infamous Jaime Lannister, he'll be remembered fondly forever. And to die in that pursuit, to die in battle, he would be immortal. Rather than being some pathetic guy who lost his fleet and a kingdom, he would be loved. Forever. So that's my argument. Euron wanted to die battling Jaime Lannister. Though in truth it doesn't work because Euron already achieved beloved immortality as a dragon slayer, but whatever. And that's all for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.